This is Doug Green, and I'm the publisher of Technology Reseller News. And I'm very pleased to have with us again Gerry Christensen of Caller ID Reputation. Gerry, thank you for joining us today.
It's great to be here, Doug.
So this is a special podcast for TR Publications and the Cloud Communications Alliance. And we're now in the run-up to the Cloud Connections event. And I'm very proud to tell everybody Gerry's going to be at the Cloud Connections event, and he's going to be talking about establishing a trust framework for B2C communications. And, Gerry, we've got a lot on the table, and we're going to talk a little bit about your discussion. But, let's start with something simple. Is there an economic cost? Is there actually damage being done by the fact that consumers can sometimes are not able to trust the phone calls that are coming in from legitimate business?
Oh, gotcha. So make sure I understand the question. So you're not talking about the damage as a result of bad actors and their campaigns that either steal money from consumers or steal your identity or whatever. You're not talking about the economic damage of that, because I think we've seen a lot of that in the media, like billions of dollars. You're talking about the opposite. Is that right?
Yeah. In other words, to make it simple, what I understand the problem to be that we're discussing today is I'm a business. I'm a hospital. I'm a furniture delivery company. I am a cleaning service, and I contact you. I call you and tell you I'm on my way, or why don't you come into the office, or it's time for your checkup. But you interpret the incoming call as spam, as fraudulent, as something other than legitimate, and I'm not able to contact you.
Oh, gotcha. Well, that is a very important question and very germane to this discussion. Excellent way to kind of start this off. So the short answer is yes, absolutely. There's a major impact, and as a matter of fact, that's essentially the whole reason for being for the company that I work for, Caller ID Reputation, and it really goes beyond just telephone number reputation, because there's a lot of factors involved. I really wish I could tell you quantitatively what that impact is. I think if we're talking about the other side of the coin, once again, if we're talking about the impact, economically speaking, of people losing money due to the bad guys, I think we could probably cite a whole range of numbers, and it's all in the billions. It's lots of money. But I think we could probably have a confidence interval between, say, I don't know, 30 billion and 100 billion, big numbers. But one of the things that I haven't seen, and I would love to see somebody do a study on this, is to figure out, quantitatively speaking, what is the impact of legitimate businesses not being able to reach their customers for a variety of reasons. You cited a couple there yourself. And what we're talking about here is the unintended consequences of all of these robocallers. One of the things that we've witnessed, for example, over and over again, is that sometimes the call labeling is wrong. I can give you a very personal experience that I had when I was at ITEXPO down in Fort Lauderdale. I was actually traveling with my wife, and we went to one of the local grocery stores there, Publix. I don't know if Publix is everywhere, but they're big in Florida. So we went to the store. My wife was using the debit card, and sure enough, it got rejected, because I guess we should have called our bank and said, hey, we're traveling to Florida. Even though she and I are both from there, we haven't been there in a while. And so it probably tripped the fraud thing. So sure enough, we got a text, which we didn't respond to. And then we got a call, and the call had an adverse label to it. I've actually saved it. I got a screenshot of both the incoming call, because I wasn't quite sure. And by the way, I routinely do that. I get calls all the time, and I do screenshots because I like to try to figure out if it's a legitimate company or whatever. And I also got a screenshot of the transcript of the voicemail. And sure enough, I'm not going to say what bank it was, but I've already reached out to them, and they're going to try to do something, or they might even become a customer of ours. I don't know. But I reached out to them and I said, hey, this was a legitimate fraud alert call, but it got labeled as, I think it was spam likely. I'll have to pull it up. I've actually, again, I got a copy of this. So if you want, I can send it to you and you can add this to your material. But perfect example. So you're absolutely right that legitimate businesses, in this case, it was a fraud alert, but it could be an appointment, like you were saying, or it could be CRM, or it could even be legitimate telemarketers that they have adverse call labeling. But it's not just labeling. Some calls are blocked. and all types of other issues. Plus, we just have a culture now, sadly, where people just don't answer the phone. And I think sometimes us in the industry make it even worse. It might have been that same conference, and I've heard this said many times before, where people say, oh yeah, I tell my grandmother, don't answer the phone unless you absolutely positively know who it is, if it's in their phone book. So I'm thinking to myself, wow, we're actually perpetuating this ourselves. We're making it even worse ourselves sometimes. But it is what it is, because there's just no trust. And so that's actually the topic of conversation I'd like to have with you today is, how do we create that trust? So in other words, the opposite of protecting consumers, they're both important, but sort of the other side of the coin of protecting consumers is, what can we do to create a trust framework so that legitimate businesses can contact consumers, where the consumer, when they get a text or a call, they actually trust it? So excellent question, Doug. Thank you for asking that.
So I understand in what you're calling a trust framework that there are several pillars to that framework.
Yeah, absolutely. There are. And I'm not going to say that this is an exhaustive list, but I'm going to hit on a few different topics. I don't know if we have time to talk about all of them, but they range from the UI, UX types of things we were just talking about, UI being user interface and UX being user experience, which is more broad than just the UI, but it includes a lot of the same things, like what does the consumer experience when they have a communications instance. And so that would run everything from number to enhanced caller ID, which is calling name, branded calling the way it's done today, branded calling the way it may be done in the future with logo and stuff like that. So that's one area. Another area is digital identity. And we have some of that in place today, but arguably there's more work that could be done there. There's this notion of know your customer, or as I say, sometimes not just KYC, but KYX, where the X is everything. It could be know your customer, know your traffic. You could know a lot of different things to have a context. Another area is authentication and validation. Stir shaken being an example of that, but there's other examples we can talk about. The idea that one needs to monitor what's happening. So in other words, it's not just important to know your customer, but actually monitor your customer. So customers will make certain either implicit or explicit assertions about who they are and what they do and so forth. But it's a good idea to kind of monitor that and see what's actually going on. Another area is consent management. And that's something that's especially important with the recent FCC ruling that went into the Federal Register. It's going to take effect in January of 2025, where at that time, there will be a need for express written one-to-one consent on all of your leads, and all of the subsequent telemarketing that happens as a result of that must be logically and topically related. So that's kind of a big deal. So taking all those things together that I just said about those 5 or 6 things I just mentioned, I really feel that together they encompass a trust framework. And it's really, really important not to just focus on any one of them, but really, if we can, as an industry, focus on all of them together so that we don't have silo approaches. To really optimize this, we need to think of them as a whole. But the tricky thing is, and the thing that I'm going to talk about in the session that I'm facilitating at Cloud Communications 2024 coming up in April, is a rhetorical question almost. How can we get together as an industry when sometimes we're competitors? Like, for example, caller ID reputation. We've got a piece of the puzzle. There's certain things we do. Somebody else might have something else. For example, we don't today do branded calling. We're actually involved in a branded calling initiative, a CTIA, but organically, natively today, we don't do branded calling. Those are 2 examples, what we do, reputation and other things, and the UI UX improvement through branded calling. They need to be considered together amongst these other 4 or 5 or 6 things to optimize the whole. So that's my very broad definition of trust framework, is all these different capabilities and solutions being optimized together so that ultimately the consumer can trust a communications attempt.
So Gerry, if I'm watching or listening to this podcast and I'm an enterprise or an organization, can you guys help me?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Not only can caller ID reputation help, but I would say the industry as a whole can help. And this is exactly what I'm going to be facilitating at the session that I'm speaking in at Cloud Connections 2024, which is in St. Petersburg on April 17th through the 19th. What I'm going to be talking about is how can we get together as an industry to provide a variety of solutions, that any one of these solutions by themselves would be very helpful, but taken together and optimized as a whole would be extremely helpful for enterprise and actually the platforms and the vendors that support enterprise. So I encourage anybody that can to join us at Cloud Connections 2024. Absolutely.
And if I'm actually coming to that show, if I'm a CCA member, or if I'm thinking about kicking the tires on membership, I'm going to come out to Tampa, St. Petersburg, and look at that show. Why should I come to your session?
Well, I think for some of the reasons that I stated, which is I'm going to be leading a discussion where hopefully I'm not going to be doing very much talking myself. I'm just going to be sort of herding the cat, so to speak, seeing who's interested in working on this trust framework, talking about some of the issues about how difficult it is to have an integrated solution that, for example, takes KYC and monitoring together and is, 1 + 1 = 3 kind of thing. So I think it's going to be a very engaging and lively session, more than just somebody standing up in front and giving a sort of a lecture.
Gerry, I want to thank you for joining me today. This has been very interesting. I'm looking forward to watching that session. I'll be there. How can I learn more about caller ID reputation?
Well, I would encourage people to either reach out to me on LinkedIn, Gerry Christensen, or just go to calleridreputation.com. And thank you, Doug.
I'm looking forward to seeing you.